So it's now 1 o'clock, so let me welcome you all to this webinar on Public Humanities Projects Grants offered by the National Endowment for the Humanities. My name is George Lozopoulos. I'm a Senior Program Officer at the Division of Public Programs at the NEH, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Tricia Brooks, also a Senior Program Officer in Public Programs. And as I said, we're going to give you a brief overview of the grants offered in our Public Humanities Projects category. This includes grants for exhibitions, historic places, and humanities discussions. So let me just get my slides up here on the screen, and we can begin. Okay. All right. So there are our names, and let me just get to the next slide there. Okay. So here's just a little outline of how we're going to proceed today. I've already introduced myself and Tricia. We're going to give you a brief overview of kind of the agency generally and the Public Programs Division where Tricia and I work. And then we're going to get to what, as I said, is the going to be the main focus for today's presentation, which is Public Humanities Projects project grants. And we're going to follow that with some advice and instructions about how to put a proposal together, what happens to proposals once they are submitted, and some things you need to do to prepare to submit. And that's going to all take about 20 minutes of me just talking. And after that, the remainder of our time, the remainder of the hour will be for questions from you all. So if you have questions, in the GoToWebinar dashboard thing, there should be a drop-down menu for questions. You can just type them right in there. And Tricia right now is monitoring those questions. She will be maybe addressing some of those questions as they come in. And then after the presentation, she will be giving me some questions, and she and I will both talk about them. Also, if you need closed captioning, this webinar is being live captioned. If you go to the chat drop-down menu, there will be a link there to take you to the live captioning for this webinar. Okay, so without any further ado, okay. So a little bit about the agency itself. Let's get started. The NEH is a federal agency established by the National Foundation on the Arts and Humanities Act in 1965. And here you can see Lyndon Johnson in a photo op signing the act. The NEH is currently under the leadership of this gentleman, John Parrish, PD. The agency's mission is to support the advancement of the humanities in the United States. And by humanities, we generally mean the various humanities disciplines: history, philosophy, literature, art theory and criticism, media studies, and so forth. And the agency's objective is to facilitate or stimulate the research, teaching, and learning of the humanities throughout the U.S. And in addition to this core mission, we have a few what we call special encouragements, things that we don't necessarily require of our applicants, but things that we like to see and things that we kind of look for, we encourage. And these are projects that explore Native American history, projects that explore the experience of veterans and the experience of war, projects that bring the humanities to communities that are typically underserved by humanities institutions, and that is both geographic communities and sort of demographic populations. And this one that's up on the screen now is a fairly recent one, A More Perfect Union. This is an initiative commemorating the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States, coming up in 2026. And I want to stress that this is not limited to projects about the founding of the nation or the colonial period. This is about looking for projects that explore the American experience, history and culture broadly in any period of time. You can find out more about this by going to NEH.gov/250. Okay. All right. So, in order to carry out this mission, the NEH is divided up into 7 separate divisions and offices, and you can see them up there on the screen now. And these separate divisions and offices offer grants that promote or facilitate the humanities in the U.S. In different formats. So there are research projects mostly for scholars. There are projects that that explore the humanities in digital formats or different ways that humanists can use digital technology to do the work of the humanities. The Division of Education Programs offers grants in support of development of curriculum for the teaching of humanities in formal classroom settings. And the one on the bottom in orange, the Division of Public Programs, which is where Tricia and I work, we support projects that deliver the humanities to the American public sort of at large. We look for projects that reach the widest audience possible. So let's zero in on what we do in public programs. These are the different kinds of grant categories we have. The first one, all the way on the left, is digital projects for the public. And this is in support of, as you can see there, websites or mobile apps or games or interactive kiosks or virtual VR experiences that utilize the humanities and, again, delivers it to as wide an audience as possible. The next 2 categories I can take together, media projects and short documentaries. These support documentary films, radio broadcasts, and podcasts, or for in the case of short documentaries, films under 30 minutes or series related to a more perfect union that, again, explore humanities topics for a wide audience. And all the way on the right, again in orange, because that's what we're going to focus on, is public humanities projects. And as I mentioned already, these are in support of 3 different formats: historic site interpretation, humanities discussions, and museum exhibitions. Now, whether we're talking about public humanities projects or any other format, they all have certain things required of all of them in public programs. All of them, of course, must be grounded in humanities scholarship. And we require our applicants to have assembled a team of humanities advisors, generally experts in the field, who not only sort of inform the project, but are kind of ideally present at the project's conceptualization and bring to the project the most up-to-date scholarly thinking on whatever that topic is. The next one, the next requirement is it must deepen the public's understanding of significant humanities questions. These 2 really go together, numbers 1 and 2, because we sometimes like to think about our grant projects in the Division of Public Programs as kind of democratizing scholarship or bringing it out to the widest audience possible. So whatever your topic is, it may or may not itself be humanistic. It might be, about something humanistic like Picasso or literature, Hemingway or something. Or it might not be humanistic. It might be about the environment or technology. The thing that is really key is that first point, that the questions or the framework that your project builds around the subject must be grounded in humanities scholarship, must interrogate the subject in a humanistic way, or in a way that draws on current humanities scholarship. This is what we call the humanities themes. And the other points are sort of related. It must attract a wide audience, and it must encourage the dialogue and exchange of ideas. So let's get into the individual grants, or the individual formats, rather, that are supported by public humanities projects. The first of these is historic places, and these are long-term programs at historic sites, neighborhoods, trails, and districts, and so forth. And these kinds of projects that we support may, take the form of living history, or tours, or exhibits, or public programs. And funding for this particular format is available at 2 levels, which I'll talk about more in detail after I go through the individual formats. There's a planning level grant for historic places that can award up to $75,000. And the implementation level grant is up to $400,000. And again, I'll give you more details about those 2 levels in just a moment. The next grant category here is Humanities Discussions. And unlike historic sites, which I just talked about, this is available at 1 level only, the implementation level. And this is for face-to-face community discussions over a period of time from 3 months to 2 years to discuss humanities-related topics or questions. And an additional requirement for humanities discussions is this must be related to the More Perfect Union encouragement that I mentioned a little while ago. The other grants, they may or may not be, and it's not required, but for this particular one, it is required. So please make note of that. And the funding cap for this one is $250,000. And number 3, exhibitions. And this is to support permanent exhibitions, traveling exhibitions within the United States, or temporary single-site exhibitions. Those are the 3 types. And this is available at both planning and implementation levels. For planning, it's up to $75,000 for permanent and traveling exhibitions, $40,000 for temporary exhibitions. Implementation grants are available for up to $400,000 for permanent and traveling exhibitions. Implementation is only available at $100,000 for temporary exhibitions. Okay, so those are the 3 formats we support in public humanities projects: historic sites, humanities discussions, and exhibitions. So as I mentioned, these grants are available at 2 different levels. There's planning and implementation. So let's talk about that now. Planning grants are for the earlier stages of your project development. We don't support, or let me put it this way, we expect that at least some work will have been done by the time you come in for submission. In other words, if you just have an idea for a project, that won't be enough to be competitive for this grant. You will need to have a few things already sort of at least gotten the ball rolling on these few things, and that is have the humanities themes at least sort of articulated in a way that we'll be able to see where the project is going in terms of its content. And we will want you to have identified scholars and had them signed on to the project as your humanities advisors. And ideally, you will have consulted with them, at least in an initial way, before coming in to submit, to help you sort of flesh out what you want your themes to be. And we want you to be able to describe what techniques or approaches you're going to be employing to get at these things. So if you can do those, have those things ready, and not more than that, then you're probably going to want to come in at the planning level. And again, planning is only available for historic sites and exhibitions. It is not available for humanities discussions. So what can you do with the planning grant? You can refine or further develop your humanities content, the format, the interpretive techniques. You can schedule and consultations with your scholars or your exhibition designers. You can explore and establish partnerships and sort of develop preliminary designs, draft scripts, or interpretive plans for your project. Okay, now implementation. These are for projects that are sufficiently developed to be, or close to being kind of ready to go live. Most of the or all of the planning will have been done, and the awarding of this grant will be for putting the project into action. So if you are in the final stages of development, if you have collaborated with your scholars and are having ongoing sort of communication with them, if your project is fully developed in terms of its content, and this is the most important, that fourth bullet there. If you have documents illustrating the project format, and this means exhibition design, elevation drawings, tour scripts, and an outline of your facilitator training, this is a part of the proposal, the application that we call the walkthrough. And it gives us kind of a written kind of picture of what the project is going to look like. Your project will need to be sufficiently advanced to be able to produce those documents. And if you can sort of check all those boxes there, then you're probably ready to come in at the implementation level. And with this grant, you can continue to meet with your scholars. You can use the grant for the fabrication of exhibition elements, and as well as supporting materials, education materials, the catalogs, the websites, other resources. You can provide staff training and conduct evaluation, as well as advertising and outreach with the implementation grant. All right, one final note about the funding for public humanities is we also offer, at the implementation level only, something we call the position in public humanities. And this is for the hiring of a recent graduate holding an MA or a PhD in the humanities to work specifically on the NEH supported project, or the grant project that you've been awarded. And you can request an additional $100,000 over the funding cap if it's a 2-year project, or if it's a 1-year grant period, you can just cut that in half and receive $50,000 for a 1-year full-time position for that. And again, this is available only at implementation, and is only available for exhibition projects and historic places projects, not for humanities discussion projects. Okay, we have 2 upcoming deadlines. We offer these grants twice a year. The next deadline is September 8th, and the next after that, it will be January 6th of 2021. Okay, so that kind of is the basic information regarding the grants themselves. Now let's talk a little bit about the application process, what happens to applications once they're submitted, and so forth. I have up here 5 bullet points. These are things that you really will want to have done before you get ready to submit. And the first of these is to make sure your organization is eligible to apply for a grant from the NEH Public Programs Division. Public Programs does not award grants to individuals. We award grants to organizations only. And these organizations are of several types, the most common being a 501c3 registered US nonprofit. Beyond that, we also offer grants to state and local government entities, or institutions of higher education, and Native American tribes. So if you are one of those organizations, then you are NEH Public Programs eligible. The next thing you need to do is register with SAM and grants.gov. What is SAM? SAM stands for System Award Management. And this is the federal government's system for tracking holders of federal grants. If you go to sam.gov, you can apply there for a ID number, and that is your identity in the world of getting federal grants. And you will definitely need to do that as early as possible, because that registration process I'm not exactly sure how long it takes, but it is not instant. It will take, I think, a couple of weeks. So do that as early as possible. And once you have that, you want to set up an account at grants.gov, which is a separate website from the NEH, and it is the site at which you will apply for an NEH grant or any other federal grant. So you need to do those 2 things. Number 3, please be sure to go to our website. It's rather long there. I have it up on the screen. This website, this page will has links to all of the things you will need to put the application together, learn how to submit it, and we have many other useful things there. We have, first of all, what we call the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity. This contains all the guidelines for putting an application together, what the individual components are, how to submit it, and so forth. We also have on this website a very useful FAQ sheet. We have sample applications of previous successful applicants, the narrative section anyway. We have information about, statistical information about our funding rate, success rate of our applications. And we also have links to lists of past awardees. So please be sure you explore that web page thoroughly. Number 4 is to contact me or Tricia or one of the other program officers in the Division of Public Programs for advice. We do advise applicants who are drafting application. We even read draft sections of applications, I think 5 weeks before the grant deadline. So it is not required, but it is definitely in your better interests to contact an NEH staff member. And finally, number 5, this is if you're already an NEH grant holder, please be sure that your reports are submitted on time, because that will delay or make ineligible an application. So those are the 5 things I really want to stress for potential applicants. All right, once you submit your proposal, this is how it will be evaluated by our panel reviewers, who I will talk about in a minute. I think it's at 7 points. Yeah, 7 points. First and foremost is the intellectual content and significance of your project. Our reviewers will ask, is this or is this not a humanities project? And by a humanities project, I mean kind of what I outlined earlier. Does the project draw on scholarship to interrogate or explore whatever the subject matter of the project is? That is the paramount criterion. After that, they will evaluate it in terms of its format and resources. Is the format well defined? Is it appropriate to the subject matter? Does it utilize sources that our panelists would consider rich humanities sources? What is the reach of the project? Does it reach as wide an audience as possible, or does it, on the other hand, target specific, maybe underserved groups or regions? If it's an implementation level proposal, it will be evaluated in terms of the readiness of its walkthrough, the project team, the advisors, and finally the work plan and budget. Is it a realistic work plan? Does it address all of the tasks necessary to advance the project? Is the budget realistic? Are the line items reasonable? And so forth. Okay, what makes a competitive proposal? So the first thing is the writing of the proposal. The tone or the language must be written for the kind of broad audience that the project will be for. You should not assume that the panel reviewers who are going to read your proposal are experts specifically in whatever field this happens to be. So please avoid jargon or sort of esoteric knowledge. Explain the significance of the project. Why will this benefit the public in terms of the public life of the humanities? How does this add to it? Again, very important. How does a project incorporate the scholarship? Is it being sort of utilized in a meaningful way that informs the kind of conceptualization of the project with very kind of sort of concrete takeaways for an audience that we can point to? And demonstrate that, again, that will reach a large audience, include audience projected numbers if you can, and demonstrate the collaboration with scholars and partner institutions. Okay, I think we're almost at the end of our 20 minutes. We're a little over, sorry. So we're almost at the end of my presentation, and I'll be ready for your questions. I just want to talk about what happens to your proposal once it's submitted to us. The first thing that happens is it goes to a peer review panel of 5 people. Usually it's 3 scholars and 2 industry practitioners from the museum world. And they will evaluate a batch of proposals. And based on those evaluations, we, the program officers, will make recommendations to submit to the National Council of the Humanities and the NEH chairman. The National Council of the Humanities is a body of 26 scholars who are appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. And they will in turn make their own recommendations and submit them up to the NEH chairman, who makes the he is the sole decider of what gets funded and what does not. And that is a rather long process. It could be 6 or 7 months. So that wraps up the basic information I wanted to get out there to you all. Again, any further questions other than the ones you're about to submit right now, you can contact a program officer like myself or Tricia. There is our email information up there on the screen. Or if you want, you can submit an email to our general inbox at publicpgms. At NEH.gov. And there is our website for the Public Humanities projects, NEH.gov/grants/public/public-humanities projects, all one word. Okay, and that brings me to the end of my presentation. And if Tricia is standing by with questions for us, we can take those now.
We have a fantastic group because there are tons and tons of questions.
Awesome.
And there are several questions about COVID, of course, because that is something that is on everybody's mind. Yeah. So first of all, there's 2 main questions about COVID. One is whether or not humanities discussions programs have to be in person because of the concerns over bringing groups together. Mm-hmm. At this time, what we are asking is that you plan for those programs to be in person. The guidelines outline them as in-person programs. So you need to plan for them as in-person programs. However, this will also answer the other questions I've received about COVID. We are very, very aware that there's no way to predict what is going to happen in the future. So plan for them to be in person, write your application as if they're going to be in person. You can hedge a bit in your application to say that if we need to go virtual, here are some of our ideas about what we may do to go virtual. But know that no matter whether you're talking about a discussion, a historic site, or an exhibition, know that we are trying to exercise as much flexibility as possible with what we refer to as change of scope requests. We know that changes will be necessary. It is something that we see even without COVID from time to time. Mm-hmm. So if an award is granted, there is a system in place for submitting a change of scope, and we will work with you to try to make things as workable as possible in our current COVID situation. George, if you could explain deadlines and the different deadlines that we have for those different programs that you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, that would be helpful. A few people asked about digital projects for the public, for example, sure. And wanted to know if it had the same deadline.
Now, the digital project for the public program has only one deadline a year, and that is in June. I'm not sure right now what the date for next year is, or if we even have a date. But if that's the grant you're interested in, you just missed the boat. So you have a year to prepare for the next submission. Media and short documentaries, that next deadline is, I believe, tomorrow, August 12th. Is that right, Tricia? And the next one after that,
yes, that's correct.
Will be the same as the January deadline for public humanities projects, which is January, what did I say, 6th? I don't have the slide in front of me, but the next two deadlines coming up for media and short docs is tomorrow and then in the first week of January.
All right. We also have a few questions about applying for multiple projects or aspects of the same project under different grant lines.
Well, I'll say a few words about that, and if you want to jump in, Tricia, please feel free. You are not disallowed from submitting multiple proposals. The first sort of rule against doing that is submitting multiple proposals for the same work. So that would be considered double dipping if there's any kind of overlap in the actual tasks or work that you are asking for funding for. If you do submit proposals for different aspects of, it's a very large project, say one proposal is for an exhibition and another one is for a, say, related website, that is, I correct me if I'm wrong, but that is not disallowed. But one thing, you will be competing against yourself at that point. And in the event, I don't think it's very common, but in the event that multiple awards are made to the same applicant, it is possible that an adjusted funding amount to cover everything might be offered too. So there are some things to consider if you are thinking about submitting multiple proposals. Do you have anything to add to that, Tricia?
I'm sorry, I was looking at a question and I didn't hear everything you said. So I just want to make sure to say that someone asked specifically about having a project that has different components to it and applying. What did you respond to that?
Yes, I did. I mentioned.
Okay, so applying for making sure that the different components are separated out enough so that they are separate. Okay, just wanted to make sure I was reading another question.
Okay, no, that's okay.
So other questions that we have, can you review the changes that were made to the deadline, to the notice of funding opportunity since the January deadline? So what's different for this September deadline from last January's deadline?
Okay, a couple points. I think just in terms of mechanics, there's a couple things to consider. The page length for the narrative is different. I should actually let me pull these numbers up because that would be useful to have. If you are submitting for a temporary, I'm sorry, let me just pull these numbers up here. Okay, I've got it. So if you are submitting as a single site temporary exhibit, the walkthrough is 7 pages. For any other implementation level grant, that number is 10 pages. If you are again, single site temporary exhibit, the narrative for planning level grants is limited to 15 pages, and all other types of planning grants are limited to 20 pages. And the project funding section, which we had required in the past, has been eliminated. And the work plan section, which had previously been part of the narrative, is now a separate attachment. Those are the big differences. They're mostly sort of, like I said, mechanical issues with the application itself.
Okay. We have so many questions. So we've gotten a few questions about submitting drafts, and I will respond to that. Typically, the deadline is 5 weeks before the application deadline in order to guarantee that your draft will be reviewed and you will be able to get comments. The deadline for drafts was announced in this notice of funding opportunity as August the 20th. So you do have until August the 20th. Do be aware that we will read one draft from each project. We unfortunately don't have time to read a draft, give comments, and then read a subsequent draft. Other questions? Oh, can you have multiple formats for your project? For example, could you have an historic site project and have a discussion program component to that?
The answer there is yes. Having multiple formats or supporting formats with a kind of main format is considered a strength. I mean, there might be some limitations of what you can do. So if you have a specific project in mind that you'd like to run by us, we'd like to hear about that in more detail. But the sort of brief, quick answer is yes. Multiple formats are allowed.
And just to add to that a little bit, there was one question that was asked that was very specific to a particular project, which I will respond outside of the webinar to anyone who asks a question that is really specific to their project. But to expand on that, what's important is selecting which format is primary. So for example, if you are doing a historic site interpretation and a discussion program, what's your primary format? You don't have to overthink it. You can make a decision if they're both sort of equally important and equally involved, complex projects. You can just pick one. And then the other one you will describe as a secondary format. Let's see, what else? We've got so many questions. Will it strengthen an application if someone includes cost share in their budget?
I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Tricia, but I don't think it's necessarily a strength. The reviewers and the agency does want to know that a proposed project can realistically be executed, and part of that is sort of having a complete funding picture. So if we know that there's going to be sort of cost sharing that's going to be making up the balance of the budget, in addition to the NEH grant, that is a strength. But I think those concerns are kind of secondary to the project strength in terms of its content. I don't know. What do you think about that, Tricia?
I would agree. So cost share is not required, and therefore it is not part of the review criteria. But what is part of the review is, as George said, we want to make sure that you can financially complete the project. And in addition to that, we want to see that organizations are actually committed to the project being completed. And while there are many, many ways to show that beyond cost share, that is one way it can be illustrated. You don't have to illustrate it that way, but it is one way it can be illustrated. So that's the only way in which, those are that and the can you complete the project financially are the only ways in which a cost share consideration would even come into our discussions. It is not required at all. So
Thanks.
can you talk a little bit more about the review panels? What's the composition of the review panels and how does that process work? And while you're at it, why don't you tell folks how they can become a reviewer? We had one person ask, and that's my favorite question.
Well,
How do they
okay.
become a reviewer? Because we need reviewers all the time.
Yes. If you would like to be a reviewer, all you need to do is reach out to Tricia or me or another program officer and let us know of your interest, and we can take it from there. It's that easy. We do have certain requirements that we look for, whether it's subject matter expertise as a scholar or industry experience as a museum or public humanities practitioner, or for other grants if you're a filmmaker, producer, and so forth. But anyway, if you would like to be a panelist and like to know more about it, just let us know who you are and we can talk about it. And what was the other part of the question was the review process.
The review
Well,
process and the makeup of the review, the peer review.
yeah. When we get our grants up to the deadline, the first thing we do is we sort the applications into groups of, as close as possible, related subject areas. So say we get one batch of applications um, that's more or less on American history. It might be different threads of American history within that. There might be, say, African American history, um, uh, American environmental history, folded into that. So we will recruit first three scholars whose specializations are appropriate to whatever areas of American history are on this panel. And in addition to that, we will recruit two industry practitioners, again, appropriate to whatever the grant is. So this being, say you're coming in for uh, a history museum exhibition on, a topic in, say, Native American history, we would likely have a curator or some other, museum professional, possibly with experience in the subject matter, but maybe not. And again, that would be 5 people in total, two industry professionals and 3 scholars. And they will rate the proposal. First, they will read it on their own. And remember those criteria I had on the screen earlier, those 7 criteria. They will send us written comments in response to each of those 7 criteria and give a final and give a rating. Then we will have now we have a video meeting with the 5 panelists. They will discuss among themselves and with me or the program officer the pros and cons of a proposal. And after that discussion, in which they will raise their concerns if they have them and sort of debate among themselves the merits and demerits, then they will go back and submit a second rating, which may or may not have changed as a result of their discussion. And their written comments, whether you get the grant or not, will be available to you. You can request them from us after the decisions are made. So if you say did not get the grant and want to reapply, it's especially helpful to see what they thought of your proposed project. Do you have anything to add to that, Tricia?
Again, I was reading questions, so
Okay,
I didn't hear everything. Did you talk about the composition
yes,
of,
yes,
of who the reviewers are? Excellent. Then I don't think I do.
Yeah.
But I have some semi-related questions, and I'm just going to go ahead and answer this because it's 2 sort of different questions, and I'm going to link them together. So I think it's important to also understand the timeline of the review. If you apply to our September 8th deadline, the decisions will be announced in early April. That is important because a few people have asked about resubmitting, and a few people have asked about the stage that they're at in their planning process and whether they could apply for planning in September and implementation in January. The answer to that is no. And the reason is that you cannot have 2 pending applications for the same project at the same time. So planning a project and implementing a project, it's the same project. So you would have to wait until after April, when the announcements are made, to be able to reapply for the same project. If you have an application and you're at the planning stage now, and you want to implement sooner than basically sooner than a year, which basically generally a planning grant will last for 12 months. So let's say you want to implement sooner than April of 2022. That's okay. You can come in and you can apply for planning level, receive funding potentially at the planning level. And if you go beyond that, that's fine. What's a problem for us is if you don't complete what we fund. So if you complete the planning and move right into implementation and you implement even before the planning period is over, that's fine. But you can't have two applications for the same project pending at the same time. So you would not be able to apply in September and then in January for the same project because you will not have a decision on the September application yet. Similarly, someone asked if they were unsuccessful in September if they could apply in January, and the answer again is no, because you won't know by January if you're successful or not. Can you talk a little bit, George, about matching funds and whether it's helpful to ask for matching funds?
Well, similar to the cost sharing question, matching funds are not required. They will only sort of again strengthen your application in the sense that we like to know that a project is financially feasible, and seeing that kind of financial commitment on the part of the applicant to raise the funds to be matched uh, does does add to the feasibility of the project. But it is not a requirement. So like I say, like as with cost sharing, the content is paramount, and that would be a secondary concern.
And I would add to that that I usually tell people only ask for matching funds if you know that you've got a donor sitting there, sitting on a pile of money, and you will loosen their pockets and shake them down better if you can say to them, hey, we can only get this other $100,000 from the NEH if we raise $100,000. That's why the matching funds are available. They're available to help you fundraise. So it doesn't play into our decision making, but it can help you in the end. George, do advisors have to be external to your organization, or can you draw from the expertise, for example, within a university? If you're at a university, can you draw from the expertise within your university?
You can absolutely use scholars that are employed by the university if you are applying as a university. The downside of that is our reviewers like to see kind of diversity of opinion. And there is sometimes the concern that if all of the advisors are in-house at an institution, that the the um, the the scholarly kind of opinion wouldn't be as varied as it might otherwise be if you had advisors from other institutions around the country. So it's not, again, not disallowed, but it would make for a stronger proposal if your advisor team were not all from the same uh, institution.
Do you have to have a tour script completed, or is having the format and sample texts sufficient? And I would say, if you want to talk a little bit about walkthroughs and what we look for in a walkthrough, and I'm happy to add to that too, because I have a little soapbox that I get
Yeah,
up
well,
on
why don't
about
you
walk.
take the lead on that one, Tricia? If you,
Okay, yes, because me and my soapbox.
yes.
So you don't have to have all of your text, your entire exhibition script, or your entire historic site script completely finished when you apply. However, in your walkthrough, if you're applying for an implementation grant, you have to submit a project walkthrough. The walkthrough needs to be something that gives us a sense from the perspective of a visitor of what they will experience. So not just, here's what the format's going to be, not just we're going to have a dialogic interaction with visitors, or there's going to be didactic wall text and artifacts, but something a lot more clear that shows us what the experience is going to be like and how that experience is going to convey the analytical content. For example, you want to say things like, as the visitor approaches the introductory gallery, they will see a large uh, tank and be drawn in to look more closely at the tank. and you want to explain, what's in the text. You want to give an indication of what's in the text that accompanies that. If there's an interactive experience or a film that is viewed, or a moment where visitors are confronted with, let's say they turn the corner and they see, something specific. I'm trying to think of an example from an exhibit that I've been to. So, for example, visitors turn the corner and they see a barber's chair and hair in the floor around the barber's chair. And they're drawn towards that and learn from the text that the first experience that Native Americans had upon entering a boarding school was that their hair would be cut off and they would be given Western style clothing, and their native clothing would be taken away from them. Then you turn the corner and you see gravestones, and that's a shocking, a shocking moment as you turn that corner, and you learn that, you learn about disease that went through the boarding schools, etc. I'm not doing this off the top of my head. I'm not giving you the greatest examples, but we want to understand not just what the text is going to be, but how text, how interaction with a docent, how artifacts, etc., will work together to help the visitor understand the analytical ideas that you are trying to convey. I hope that helped. George, can you go back to the slide with our contact information on it? A few people wanted to see our contact information
Yes.
again. And then if you can talk a little bit about discussion programs and planning, since we don't fund humanities discussions at a planning level. Can you talk a little bit about how there's some differences there in expectation?
Yeah. So because we only offer humanities discussions at the implementation level, we do expect that you will have, the walkthrough, as complete as you can get it, and that it will be ready to sort of go into action when the grant is made. Um, we will want to see not just, you know, lists of, speakers, for example, but we want to know kind of what the visitors or the participants in these discussions will experience, how they will be drawn into the experience, what they will, how they will be engaged and what they will get out of it. So, it's not enough to say we have this list of scholar facilitators who have agreed. We want to know a little bit more in detail, or I'm sorry, a lot more in detail, about what these scholar facilitator or discussion leaders will be doing with whatever, say, assigned reading they're going to be talking about, or if it's something else. So I guess that's all I have to add about this, is that we want to see, I mean, because obviously there's no script involved in a discussion, but we want to know what will be taking place in the discussion, beyond the list of speakers or facilitators.
Okay, we have a lot of questions and only a few more minutes. So, let's see. I'm sorry, there's a whole lot, and I'm trying to look through and see if there's some that are similar to each other so we can hit as widely as possible. Anyone that's not answered here, I will send you the answer. What is the average number of proposals that are reviewed? So essentially, what are you competing with if you apply?
Oh gosh, I don't have those numbers handy in my head, but I can maybe find them.
Yeah, I can say usually overall for all three categories in public humanities projects, exhibitions, humanities discussions, and historic sites combined, we're usually around 100 applications each deadline.
Yeah.
We're usually floating in that area. And reviewers will read anywhere from about 15 to 20 at a time. We do not go into the process saying, oh, this time around, we're going to fund X number of applications, or, oh, this time around, we're going to give X dollars in funding. What we do is we look at whatever is in front of us, whatever applications we receive, and we determine which ones we feel rise to the level of funding. And generally then work from there with the funding that we have to try to find a way to at least partially fund those that we feel have risen to the level of being fundable.
And just to add to that, on our website, I found that, yeah, Trish, you're right. For the last 5 competitions, we've had an average of 99 applications per competition. And the funding ratio was 16%. So out of 100 applications, roughly 16 were successful.
Okay. Trying to see what else do we have here that's let's see. So people want to know how many scholars should they have? How many partners should they have for a project?
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer. It depends on the kind of scale of your project, but I think the kind of typical project we see has, I think, 4 or 5 humanities advisors. Does that sound, in your experience, about right to you, Tricia?
I wouldn't put a number to it, even for a
Yeah,
typical project. It's so hard because typical project is so broad.
sure.
I've seen projects that have 15, 20 advisors or partners. It really does depend on your individual project and what your project calls for. So in terms of partners, I would consider what are the components of this project that the partners are contributing to. You want to make sure you keep it manageable. So you don't want to have so many people that you can't keep control over what's going on and keep track of what's happening. You want to make sure that you have the right people to cover all of the elements that you are proposing as well. So it's really hard to put a number to that. Hate to give a non-answer, but it's really hard. George, we say that we will fund projects that are in formal educational settings. We don't fund formal K-12 classroom projects. So can you talk a little bit about what would be considered an informal setting, particularly as it relates to a discussion program?
You mean as opposed to something that's designed specifically for classroom use?
Right. What would be an example of an informal educational setting?
Um, wow, I got to think of something on the top of my head. Like what comes to my mind is a library, or gosh, I'm blanking right now. Do you have anything, Tricia, to?
So basically what I would say is the reason that language is in our guidelines is because our division specifically cannot fund formal educational settings. So informal settings, after school programs, libraries, as George said, programs that take place in a library that are voluntary programs that people attend. we fund any number of types of projects that offer field trip options. So we can fund the project, you can create a field trip that then a school brings the students to the field trip. But our issue is we cannot fund something that is structured for the teacher will stand in front of the class and lead a discussion in X, Y, or Z way, or we will send people to the school for a classroom setting where students are receiving credit to be there and participate in the program. Those are the things we can't fund. So basically anything else is considered informal education, a museum exhibition or program at a museum, anything of that nature. I'm going to put one more question out there. Well, two actually. So one is, do we fund virtual exhibits? We do, but you've got to apply to digital projects for the public. Anything that's primarily digital needs to go through digital projects for the public. And that deadline again will be in June. And there are a few more questions. I will take those questions and respond to people individually offline because we have come to our time limit. But there's also the question, George, of whether the slides will be available and whether this session is being recorded.
Yes, it is being recorded and it will be available. I think we said it's going to be put up on YouTube.
On our NEH YouTube channel, we can.
On our NEH YouTube channel. So you can review the slides there at your leisure. I don't think they're available as a PDF. That's what the asker is asking. But yeah, the webinar itself and the slides will be available to view on our YouTube channel.
All right. Well, I think we'll leave it at
Right.
that. I think there are a few questions that I missed. I'm going to go through and respond to individuals. There are a couple of questions that were very specific to projects. And thank you all for attending. George,
Yes.
do you have any parting words?
I also want to thank everybody for tuning in and good luck with your proposals. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me or Tricia or any of the other program officers who are waiting for your call.